Middays in the Element Wealth Studios, Dave Hughes here, and joining us now on the air, the editor-in-chief of the National Review. If you have been paying any attention to politics forever, it seems like, you know this man. Rich Lowry joins us. How are you doing today, Rich?
I'm not too bad. How are you?
Not too bad at all. That's probably a good way to put it. Number one, before we get into any of the current events going on, I was thrilled when I saw what kind of amounted to an apology from NPR a couple of weeks ago for you.
Yeah, so I won't bore everyone with the backstory, but I was smeared. People said I said a racial slur that I didn't say on the Megyn Kelly show. I just kind of misspeaking and caught awkwardly in between a word. And NPR initially ran a headline how I appeared to say this racial slur and had a lot of verbiage in there that wasn't great. And then they changed the article overnight to make the headline better and some of the context better, which was good. But then they actually, which surprised me, they had their public editor go back and do an extensive report on why they got this wrong, why they never should have run the item in the first place, and how terrible it was. So that was great. It's kind of rare where you get vindicated by NPR, but I was happy to take it.
Well, and I think it really shows off the rush to judgment that is dominating political conversations these days. It seems like everything, no matter what the topic is, everybody immediately runs forward to explain why the other side are just horrible, horrible people. Is that really productive in the long run for America?
No, no one takes care with anything anymore. But there's also just a long running campaign to smear people on the right as racist, no matter what. And I think a lot of people who are accusing me of this, they knew it wasn't true. It was entirely in bad faith, but they just knew the accusation itself would be harmful and potentially have some real world effects, which it did. I got canceled from a speech at Indiana State University. There's another institution out in Wisconsin that canceled me, that's now reinvited me. So this is a case maybe where the truth is actually caught up to the lie, which is gratifying, but it's no fun to be lied about.
No, it's not. Now, having said that, let's just transfer right over to the presidential election that's going on right now. We're less than 3 weeks out from Election Day itself. We're starting, I've been talking about it this hour, we're starting to see a swing in some of the polls towards President Trump. What's your take on how things are going with this campaign and where we're headed?
Well, I think it's basically been a tie all along. It was a tie before the first debate, roughly, and even right after the first Biden-Trump debate. It's still pretty close, but then Biden was getting so hammered by his own side for about 3 weeks there. Then he really began to slip, and the race was in a different place. And then Kamala Harris comes in, and she's a kind of replacement-level Democrat, maybe at best, and it comes back to a tie, which is still basically where it is. It's just that some of the sugar highs come off. She has shown some slippage in swing state polls, and there's some national polls that show her losing ground as well. So this thing is still very close to go either way. My guess all year has been that Trump will win, but it's basically a coin flip.
Well, the advice that I've been giving, and I said it just a minute ago, whatever the poll is, because we all have a tendency, if a poll backs up something that we believe, it's a great poll. If it says the opposite, well, that's a terrible poll. You know how this works. It doesn't matter what the poll shows. If all the polls suddenly switched around and showed Trump with a 10-point lead, we still need to keep the attitude that we're 10 points behind all the way through until Election Day. And I think it's important that we don't lose sight of that, Rich.
Yeah, so look, there's some persuadable voters in the middle, and both candidates in their own ways are trying to get at them. But also, just a huge factor in this election, more so than past races, is just who's going to show up, who's going to be motivated, who's going to turn out their vote. Because there is a persuadable middle, but it's smaller than ever before. So if there's a Trump supporter out there who's complacent, maybe in Mississippi, you can be complacent, but no one in any swing state should be complacent. Because even the polls that have them ahead in the key swing states, it's a point or two, which is within the margin of error. So it really matters who shows up, and we won't really know, right, until election night or maybe a day or two after in some states.
Well, that's what I was about to bring up because, we've already had some states, Pennsylvania, I think, is one of them that actually came out and said that it would be several days after Election Day before they could count all the mail in ballots. And I love the explanation that they gave because, you have to open up the envelope. You have to unfold the ballot. Like this is, major heavy lifting that you have to do.
Yeah. Like Elon Musk can land a rocket back where it took off from, but we can't open envelopes in a timely manner. It's insane. And, Florida, look, my preference would be everyone shows up on Election Day and they pull the lever the way we always did. And there's less room for shenanigans and human error in that process. But unfortunately, we're not going back to that world. But Florida has a lot of early vote and mail-in vote, and they just count it as it comes in. And so they know on, 9 p.m. on election night, they have the results, So there's no reason that every state in the country can't do the same thing. But it's just shameful that Pennsylvania, that matters so much, is we might not know the result for days.
Yeah, which does bring up the question, because this has been the trend lately in politics. When do you think, your best guess, when do you think we will actually have some firm feeling about what happened in this election? Obviously, I don't think it's going to be November 6th this time around. How long do you think this process will take?
I don't know. I would say that probably a day after we'll have a good idea who's in the stronger position, and then it wouldn't surprise me. I'm just guessing it'll be the weekend. When we might have a winner declared, which might have been pretty much what happened in 2020 as well. I can't remember the exact timeline, but I would expect something similar. Look, the race was close in 2016. It was close in 20. It would be shocking if not really close this time as well.
Let me ask you a question kind of off the reservation here, but I feel that it's very important. Can anything be done? And if so, what can we do to lower the temperature a bit? That's one of the things I love about the National Review is you guys, and I recommend anybody who hasn't been to the National Review and read through some of their content. It's presented so well, it's written so well, it's done so well. What can we do to lower the temperature? Because it seems like everyone is spending all of their time at each other's throats. As we said at the beginning, that's not productive. What can be done to back out of that somewhat and get back to just substantive arguments about the issues?
Yeah, don't ask me questions I don't know the answer to. Wow. I don't know. I don't think the temperature is being lowered anytime soon. And look, this is part of living in a free society. And in America, we've always had deep political divisions that are fought out in a fractious and often insulting way. And everyone has their own approach and their own place in the media ecosystem. But at NR, we try to make it a practice. We'll take on the best arguments of the other side, even if we hate those arguments, even if they think they're deeply wrong. We'll consider them on the merits and take them on and defeat them substantively. And that's our approach. There's a place for bomb throwing. There's a place for more kind of performative sort of journalism and advocacy. I wouldn't want everyone in the country to just be just like NR, focused on the printed word and focused on the substance and the way we are. But we think that's our role, and it's an important one to fill.
Well, to me, that method, that way of going about things is more productive and stands a much higher chance of getting us to a better place than the screaming that we get so many times from everybody else, it feels like.
Yeah, but again, we've always been really divided, whether the 1790s, right, when the founders, were beginning politics in this country, to the 1850s, obviously, in the 60s and 70s, we had domestic terrorism campaigns in the United States and cities burned to the ground. So this isn't anything new, but the thing I think is a little new is everything's a little dumber. And I think that's the effect of cable news and social media, and that's very, very unfortunate. We no longer have Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson at each other's throats, or Lincoln and Douglas. We're several steps way down from that now.
I would absolutely love it, and obviously impossible, if there had been some way to record some of those arguments from some of the founding fathers, because I think they would be instructive and severely entertaining to listen to.
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, this is one of the country's major blessings, obviously providential, that you had this generation really practical-minded but idealistic men who had clashing views, but could also come together and compromise on really important things, and just had a long view that they had immediate political needs and things they wanted, and animosities and all the rest of it, but a long view about setting the country on a course that would make it the greatest nation in the world, and they achieved it. Now it's a question of just whether we can keep it. Like the old Franklin quote, we got a republic if we can keep it.
Well, Rich, can you hang on through the break?
Sure, absolutely.
Fantastic. Rich Lowry, the editor-in-chief of the National Review, and one of the guys that's got his head bolted on straight. That's rare to say in the political world these days. We'll continue with him on Middays in the Element Wealth studios next. Hughes here, and on the air with us, editor-in-chief of the National Review, Rich Lowry. Rich, I want to get your take on something else, because one of the pieces of news that broke this morning was that the FBI has now revised their crime statistics from 2022, something that had been touted as not the problem it was said it was. They originally said it was over 2% that violent crime had dropped. Now they've revised it and said actually in 2022, it was up 4.5%. Now, we've seen that with job numbers and everything else. How hard does that make it for the journalism world in general to deal with these official numbers that come from the government, and then later on it turns out they just weren't the truth at all? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think in light of what we've seen, you just have to have a grain of salt about all these numbers and emphasize that they're prone to revisions. And -2 to +4, maybe in the scheme of things statistically, is not a huge change, but that's a pretty big difference. It creates a different headline when you're reporting that news. And I also think with regard to the crime statistics, just anyone who's in a major city, you feel it. You feel a greater sense of disorder. You can just see it with your own eyes, even if you're not witnessing crime or, God forbid, the victim of a crime. So I think there have been a lot of people that had a healthy dose of skepticism for that initial FBI number.
At what point do people in general, on both sides, finally get tired of seemingly being lied to on an almost hour-by-hour basis every day? Or is there no end to that? Do people just continue to roll on?
Well, it's just a reason why people have lost respect and trust in so many American institutions just across the board. The FBI, in some ways, this may be the least of it, given that the role they played in the Russia-Gate hoax, when clearly anyone with any ounce of common sense would have known at the very outset of that investigation that there's no way that Donald Trump had conspired with Russia, but they kept it going for years. My view is these things, rather than conspiracies, just tend to be ineptitude. I've delved a little bit more into the first Trump assassination attempt, and there's so many things with that, like how does that make sense? But then you read the long report, and it's pure government incompetence. So these people need to be better. Their leaders need to be more accountable, and they need to be focused on winning back the trust of the public.
And I don't think there's much focus on that at the moment. I think there's more a focus, it feels like anyway, and this is part of what you're talking about. It feels like there's much more of a focus on manipulating the trust of the public to achieve their own ends and goals, whoever it is.
Sure, and this was a big inflection point during the pandemic, right, where government either they knew better or they at least knew there was more doubt around what they were saying than they were letting on. But they thought there was a greater good of supposed public health to protect. So they misled the public on a bunch of stuff. You just look at childhood masking. When finally Glenn Youngkin was elected in Virginia, and the ice broke on that issue, and we're going to stop demanding that our small children wear masks at schools. You could finally it emerged. Various places started to report we were way out of whack with. No one else in the advanced world had masked kids the way we did because there's no evidence for it. But they told us we were going to kill kids. We didn't care about anyone's welfare or the health of teachers if we just said you don't need to wear masks or it should be voluntary. So again and again, this has been the experience. And again, it's why not just people have lost trust in institutions, they've lost trust in so-called experts.
Well, and that process continues to move forward, I think, and I don't see a change in that anytime soon from where I'm sitting anyway here in Mississippi. But that does, I think, provide an opportunity for people who are willing to go out, do the work, make the effort, and show that they're just interested in the truth. I kind of think that's what you guys do at National Review.
We try, and there are people who run much more important institutions than we do who really need to be focused on that on this. And it's being one is being good, being accountable, and making sure you're doing the best job you can, and then being transparent about it. And again, the first Trump assassination attempt, sorry to keep coming back to that initially was not what was happening. The director of the Secret Service, this was bad, but it's okay, and I'll fix it. No, you were there when the president was in charge, when the president came an inch away from getting killed in cold blood on live TV. You got to go. And she did after that disastrous congressional hearing. But that's why people don't have trust. They think they're morons or worse who are in charge, and they're all about themselves rather than the public interest.
You brought up the pandemic, and it kind of illustrates why I asked one of the questions I did earlier, which was when would people maybe one day just wake up and say, you know what, I'm not buying this anymore, and move on. And we may be seeing part of that process now, because during the pandemic, everything went into lockdown. Everybody went home. The planet was deserted, it felt like, if you got out of your house, which I did on a daily basis. And then one day, after a few months, there was no meeting, there was no declaration. It just seemed like, it felt like, the majority of the population woke up one morning and said, yep, done with this, and just went back to normal life. That's what it felt like, which kind of gives me hope that there is a possibility for that kind of process to help them with some of the other, how should I put it, misleading information that's put out.
Yeah, I mean, you just can't take at face value anything you hear. You got to investigate and kick the tires yourself and find various different sources of information. And during the pandemic, we had alternate models of leadership. Ron DeSantis, Brian Kemp, other governors who did it differently. And look, it was a once in 100-year event, so it's understandable you can get some things wrong or be overly dire about it at the outset. But as you went along and you carefully looked at the research, there's no reason to follow Dr. Fauci down this lockdown model, and too many people did. But I have to say, I just came down from the Northeast down here, and there are a lot of people on the plane, wearing masks. I don't think masks are going to go away for a certain segment of the population, maybe ever.
Well, I think you're right. And other countries, Japan is a perfect example of that. Mask wearing is just a fact of daily life. Most people do it just because, and they were doing it before the pandemic happened. Yeah,
no, definitely. But this is something we've kind of imported, and it's not most people. 90% aren't, but a certain segment of the population has just decided it's too dangerous to go around unmasked. Which no one believed prior to the pandemic.
No, and I'm sorry, even now, even today, even during the height of the pandemic, if I see you driving down the road by yourself in the vehicle and you have a mask on, I'm going to laugh at you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you'd see people jogging with masks, yes, outside with us, and maybe they make a difference if you're wearing them correctly and they're right the exact mask, in a really tight setting. But being outdoors, you're fine. The science was clear about that from the beginning. But the irony is these people think they're following the science, but instead are following myths and legends.
On a side note, I just want to throw one thing in here, and I haven't been asked to do this. I'm not going to expect any kickbacks. Noah Rothman, can you give the guy a raise? And I'll
pass that along. He'll be very happy with that sentiment.
Especially for one sentence, because you have a story on National Review right now entitled "The Joy Is Gone," which I think is pretty obvious to anyone. Anybody that can write, but as Brad Summer gave way to apprehension autumn, they need like an extra cookie in the break room or something. Come on, Rich.
Yeah, I mean, it was so synthetic. Kamala Harris went from a subpar vice president, pretty much universally recognized as such, to the second coming of Barack Obama in 48 hours, right? How does that happen? And she just, Barack Obama, I disagree with him profoundly, obviously, on many things, but he was a genuinely talented politician who was charismatic and led a kind of a movement. And they're trying to make that, but she can't get off the teleprompter, or it's a debacle. So it's a synthetic phenomenon, and it's losing some steam now.
And I think it will continue to do so. Rich, I've enjoyed this, man. We need to schedule this like every day. Well, no, you're busy. You've got things to do. But every so often, we need to schedule this because I've enjoyed this a lot.
Just reach out. Let's do it. I appreciate your kind words and appreciate being on.
Well, keep up the fantastic job. Hang around and wait. You've already gotten an apology from NPR. There may be more coming. You never know. What's the expression? It's a new day. Yeah, right. Sure, we'll go with that.
Exactly. A new way forward.
Rich Lowry, the editor-in-chief of the National Review. Go check it out if you haven't. If you can't find it, we'll get you there. NationalReview.com is the easiest way to find it, I would believe. Rich, keep fighting the good fight for getting the truth out there. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much. God bless.
We will continue on Middays in the Element Wealth Studios on SuperTalk Mississippi right after this. Keep